DHL de Guatemala Flight 7216. On April 7, 2022, a Boeing 757-27, a cargo jet operated by DHL de Guatemala, lifted off from Costa Rica's Juan Santa Maria International Airport, heading for Guatemala City. Just minutes after takeoff, the pilots noticed something was wrong. The aircraft had suffered a hydraulic system failure. With only 2 people on board, the 58-year-old captain and his 43-year-old first officer, the crew declared an emergency and circled the skies above Muelle de San Carlos to burn off fuel before attempting a risky return. At 10:24 a.m., the jet touched down smoothly. But what happened next was chaos. The loss of hydraulic pressure crippled the autobrake, nose wheel steering, and left thrust reverser. As the plane slowed to around 60 knots, asymmetric thrust suddenly kicked in. The right engine's reverse thrust shut off, while the left engine surged to 91% power. The imbalance sent the aircraft veering uncontrollably to the right, spinning 180 degrees before slamming into the ground and snapping the fuselage clean in two. Incredibly, both pilots climbed out without a single injury. Investigators later found that fatigue and wire stress had damaged a hydraulic hose in the left landing gear, causing the entire failure. Boeing's analysis ruled out mechanical malfunction, instead pointing to possible human muscle memory, the simultaneous movement of the left throttle and right reverse lever during the landing sequence. The Costa Rican Civil Aviation Council concluded that while the pilots followed all emergency checklists correctly, a design oversight dating back to Boeing's 2001 service bulletin might have prevented the catastrophe if acted upon. The aircraft, worth several $1 million, was written off, becoming the 12th Boeing 757 hull loss in history. What remained of the broken fuselage now serves as a training aid for Costa Rican firefighters, a haunting reminder of precision, professionalism, and a twist of fate that spared 2 lives. DHL International Aviation ME Flight 611. On the night of July 1, 2002, 2 aircraft crossed paths in one of aviation's most haunting tragedies, the Überlingen midair collision. A Tupolev Tu-154M, carrying 69 people, including 52 Russian schoolchildren, was flying from Moscow to Barcelona. At the same time, a Boeing 757 cargo jet operated by DHL, with just 2 crew members, was cruising toward Brussels. Both were at 36,000 feet when disaster struck over southern Germany. Inside Zurich's Air Traffic Control Center, Peter Nielsen was the only controller on duty that night. Maintenance had crippled radar systems and even the phone lines to other control towers. When Nielsen noticed the 2 planes converging, he instructed the Tupolev to descend, unaware that its onboard TCAS system had already ordered the opposite, to climb. The DHL crew, following their TCAS, also began to descend. 2 aircraft, both dropping fast, now raced toward each other in the dark sky. At 10:35 p.m., just seconds before impact, the Russian pilots spotted the DHL jet, but it was too late. The Boeing's vertical stabilizer sliced through the Tupolev's fuselage, splitting it apart. The wreckage rained down over the small German town of Überlingen. Every single person aboard both planes, 71 lives in total, was lost. Investigators later found that maintenance failures, staff shortages, and ambiguous TCAS procedures were to blame. The tragedy led to sweeping reforms in global air traffic systems. But the story didn't end there. 2 years later, Vitaly Kaloyev, a Russian man who lost his wife and children in the crash, tracked down and stabbed Peter Nielsen to death in an act of revenge. In a cruel twist, Kaloyev returned home to cheers and medals, while the accident that began with one small miscommunication became a lasting reminder of how fragile human systems can be, even at 35,000 feet. Swiftair Flight 5960. In the early hours of November 25, 2024, a Boeing 737-400 SF cargo jet operated by Swiftair for DHL Aviation was approaching Vilnius airport after taking off from Leipzig, Germany, when something went terribly wrong. The aircraft, registered ECMFE, had been in service for 31 years and was carrying only 4 crew members on board. At 5:28 a.m. local time, while making its final descent, the plane lost control and slammed into the ground near the Liebkalnis neighborhood, less than 1 mile north of the runway. The crash site was a quiet residential area, but by sheer luck, no one on the ground was hurt. The 2-story house it struck caught fire almost instantly, yet all 13 occupants inside escaped before flames consumed part of the building. The captain lost his life, while the co-pilot and 2 crew members survived with injuries. The aircraft skidded between roads and cars before coming to rest, a streak of burning metal marking the path it tore through the neighborhood. Authorities from Lithuania, Spain, Germany, and the United States immediately launched a joint investigation. Both black boxes were recovered by 11:30 a.m., and later sent to Germany for analysis. Early findings ruled out sabotage or terrorism, despite early rumors linking it to a separate arson attack on another DHL flight months before. By March 2025, investigators pointed to human error as the most likely cause. The crew had mistakenly disabled the hydraulic system controlling the flaps, leaving the aircraft unable to slow or stabilize during approach. In the confusion, they also switched to the wrong air traffic control frequency, cutting off vital communication in the final moments. The Boeing 737, valued at roughly $8 million, was destroyed, marking another painful entry in DHL's history of aviation losses and a grim reminder of how one wrong switch can turn a routine delivery into a fatal tragedy. ASL Airlines Hungary Flight 7332. In the early morning hours of August 5, 2016, a Boeing 737-476 SF cargo plane operating for DHL on behalf of ASL Airlines Hungary was completing a routine flight from Paris-Charles de Gaulle Airport to Bergamo, Italy. But as the jet, registered HAFAX, approached runway 28 through heavy rain and low visibility, what should have been a smooth landing turned into chaos. The plane touched down roughly 6,562 feet into the 9,514-foot runway, far too late to stop safely. With wet conditions and poor braking action, the aircraft tore past the runway end, smashed through the airport perimeter fence, and thundered onto an active 4-lane highway at nearly 90 knots. Cars swerved as the massive 737, weighing around 120,000 pounds, skidded across the asphalt, shredding vehicles in a nearby parking lot before finally grinding to a halt more than 1,640 feet beyond the runway. Both pilots were pulled from the wreckage alive but seriously injured. The aircraft, valued at over $6 million, was a total loss. Its CFM56 engines ripped off, landing gear destroyed, and horizontal stabilizer fractured. Miraculously, no one on the ground was killed. The Italian Air Investigation Agency quickly launched an inquiry and recovered both the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder the same day. The final report, released in August 2018, blamed the crash on pilot error, specifically a loss of situational awareness during approach and landing. Fatigue and stress likely played a role, as the pilots had been flying through storms for hours with limited visibility. For nearly 3 hours, Bergamo Airport remained closed, diverting dozens of flights to Milan Malpensa. What started as an ordinary DHL delivery turned into one of Europe's most spectacular runway overruns. A chilling reminder of how one misjudged touchdown point can send a 60-ton jet straight onto a highway. Air Contractors DHL Flight 6321. In the early hours of November 16, 2012, an Air Contractors Airbus A300B4, operating as DHL Flight 6321, departed Leipzig Airport, Germany, bound for Bratislava, Slovakia. The short 45-minute flight was uneventful until the very end. The aircraft, registered EIEAC, approached runway 22 under calm conditions with a light 7-knot crosswind from 120 degrees. Everything about the ILS approach looked perfect. The captain, acting as pilot flying, lowered the flaps to 25 degrees, armed the autobrake in MED mode, and touched down smoothly about 2,296 feet from the threshold. 6 seconds after the nose gear touched down, the cockpit suddenly shook violently. The crew felt heavy vibrations that grew stronger as the plane slowed. At 85 knots, they stowed the thrust reversers to regain control, but the aircraft began veering sharply left. The captain applied strong braking and full rudder, but nothing worked. The 150,000-pound freighter slid off the runway at 45 knots, crashing nose first into a concrete inspection pit. The nose gear collapsed, and the jet skidded roughly 1,312 feet before coming to rest in the grass. Both pilots escaped without injury, but the aircraft sustained severe structural damage, leading to its write-off, a loss valued at over $10 million. Investigators later found a small but devastating error. Washers in the nose gear torque link hinge had been incorrectly installed. This seemingly minor mistake allowed the hinge shaft nut to loosen mid-flight, causing the nose gear to lose steering control entirely. The free-floating gear began to shimmy uncontrollably, pulling the jet off the runway. The investigation blamed both maintenance error and unclear manufacturer instructions for the improper assembly. The crash exposed a major gap in safety design. There were no rules requiring structures near runways to be built to minimize aircraft damage during excursions. One missing washer turned a flawless flight into a $1 million wreck. Air Tahoma Flight 185. On August 13, 2004, a DHL cargo flight operated by Air Tahoma was on its final approach to Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky International Airport when things went horribly wrong. The aircraft, a 51-year-old Convair 580, had been in the skies since 1953, logging an enormous 67,886 flight hours. That night, Flight 185 departed from Memphis carrying parcels for DHL, but just 1 mile, 1.6 kilometers, short of the runway, the plane plummeted into the World of Sports golf course in Florence, Kentucky. There were only 2 people on board, Captain Bruno Pacelli, 49, and First Officer Michael Gelwicks, 37. The crash claimed Gelwick's life, while Pacelli survived with minor injuries. Investigators quickly determined the cause wasn't bad weather or mechanical failure. It was fuel starvation caused by pilot error. The captain had failed to follow proper fuel crossfeed procedures, which caused both engines to draw fuel from the left tank instead of using both. As fuel drained unevenly, everything still seemed fine, until the left tank ran dry. In a terrifying chain reaction, both engines flamed out mid-descent and the aircraft lost power entirely. The National Transportation Safety Board's report was blunt. The captain's poor pre-flight planning, distraction during flight, and late checklist execution all played roles in the tragedy. Even worse, the crew missed warning signs, like the aircraft's shifting balance, that clearly pointed to a fuel imbalance. The impact destroyed the aircraft, worth around $1.2 million, but spared lives on the ground. The crash later appeared in Mayday's Running on Empty, a haunting reminder that even a simple oversight in fuel management can turn a routine flight into a fatal descent, just 1 mile away from safety. DHL Air Flight 4982. On November 9, 2024, a routine DHL air cargo flight from Leipzig, Germany to Geneva, Switzerland, nearly turned into a disaster when one of its Rolls-Royce RB211 engines failed mid-flight. The aircraft, a Boeing 757-200 registered GBMRA, was descending toward Geneva when the crew had to make a split-second decision: shut down the engine to prevent further damage. Flying with only one engine is possible but risky, especially during descent. Despite the danger, the pilots managed to keep control and land safely on runway 22 at Geneva Airport. The Boeing 757-200, a workhorse of DHL's European fleet, is known for its reliability, but engine failures at altitude can happen in an instant, often giving the crew seconds to react. The quick decision to shut the engine down likely saved the aircraft and its cargo load, worth several $100,000. After the landing, the jet was grounded in Geneva for inspection, and as of November 21, 2024, it still hadn't returned to service. Swiss Transportation Safety Investigation Board opened a preliminary review to determine whether a full-scale investigation was needed. While the crew's training and calm handling prevented a potential tragedy, the incident highlighted ongoing concerns about aging aircraft components and engine reliability in high-frequency cargo operations. This wasn't DHL's first scare in recent years. The company's fleet has faced incidents ranging from cabin pressure loss to hydraulic system failures. Still, DHL's strong safety record shows that even when a critical system fails, preparation and precision can turn a life-threatening moment into a controlled emergency. The Geneva incident stands as a quiet reminder that in aviation, every second and every decision counts. European Air Transport Flight OODLL. On November 22, 2003, European Air Transport Flight, a DHL Airbus A300B4-203F, took off from Baghdad International Airport carrying cargo bound for Bahrain, and flew straight into one of the most terrifying moments in aviation history. Just minutes after takeoff, while climbing through 8,000 feet, a 9K-34 Strela 3 missile struck the aircraft's left wing, tearing through its structure and igniting a raging fire. The explosion shredded critical control lines and caused a complete hydraulic failure, meaning the pilots had no control over the plane's flaps, ailerons, or rudder. Inside the cockpit were Captain Eric Ganot, First Officer Steve Michelson, and Flight Engineer Mario Rofel, 3 men who suddenly found themselves piloting a 172,000-pound aircraft using only engine thrust. They managed to stabilize the aircraft by adjusting each engine's power asymmetrically, a near impossible task at that altitude. With 3,300 feet of damaged runway ahead and their systems failing, the crew improvised every step. Rofel dropped the landing gear manually using gravity, a risky but vital move that helped slow and balance the aircraft. After a tense 10-minute fight for control, the crew lined up with runway 33L at Baghdad. The plane came in too fast, veered off the centerline, tore through sand, smashed a razor wire fence, and finally stopped after 3,300 feet. Battered but intact. All 3 crew members survived without a single injury. The damage was catastrophic. The left wing, engines, and undercarriage were wrecked, costing over $10 million in repairs. Yet, their quick thinking turned what should have been a fiery disaster into one of aviation's greatest survival stories. Their actions earned them the Hugh Gordon Burge Memorial Award and the Flight Safety Foundation's Professionalism Award, honors reserved for pilots who redefine what it means to stay calm in chaos. European Air Transport Flight QY126, a DHL Boeing 757-200, operating as Flight QY126 from Leipzig to Frankfurt, had just lifted off on February 13, 2021, when disaster almost struck. As the freighter climbed through 5,300 feet, its main cargo door suddenly swung open midair, tearing away panels that rained down near the Schkopau coal power plant about 10 miles west of the airport. The crew immediately halted the climb and turned back. Despite the door damage and severe aerodynamic drag, they managed to land safely just 15 minutes after takeoff, stopping about 4,900 feet down runway 08 ER. Investigators from Germany's BFU later confirmed that the locking pins on the door hadn't fully engaged, meaning the door was never truly secure. The hydraulic actuator also showed signs of air in the system, which may have caused the lock to fail under pressure. Incredibly, none of the three on board, the captain, first officer, and a passenger, were injured and no cargo was lost. But the aircraft, worth several $1 million, suffered substantial damage to its fuselage and door structure. During the climb, the crew noticed odd signs: a rapid cabin pressure increase and ear-popping discomfort. Then came a loud bang. The autopilot began struggling, forcing the captain to take manual control. For a few moments, the plane rolled 5 to 8 degrees off course, and instruments falsely showed a fuel loss of nearly 1 ton, later confirmed as fuel sloshing caused by lateral G-forces. Experts later said that, had this occurred at 35,000 feet and 350 knots, the cargo door could have been ripped off entirely, likely destroying the aircraft. The DHL 757 was later ferried to Budapest for repairs. Its survival owed entirely to quick thinking, a calm cockpit, and sheer luck that it failed minutes after takeoff, not miles into the sky.